Okay, so folks, we're going to get started. We got a good crowd here tonight. I will tell you both, we've started doing these virtual meetings, virtual programs, my highest registered virtual program to date. So pretty pleased with that. Thank you for everyone for joining. I'm Joyce McDaniel. I am the Executive Director for the Women's Political Collaborative of Tennessee. Cannot tell you how excited I am about this program tonight. I will tell you, both of you all, in honor of my friend, my second mother, the late Senator Annabelle Clement O'Brien, I made my gin and tonic with her glasses that say politics is a beautiful word on them. So we're doing that. So to get started, I want to just do a short intro here of each of our speakers tonight. Larry Woods is an attorney who teaches constitutional law at TSU, who loves nothing more than a good political fight. His law practice is known for cases involving civil rights. Larry marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, John Lewis, Julian Bond, and did voter registration in Mississippi in the 1960s, and did draft counseling to protest the war. He is passionate about his family, books, coaching, debate, and political strategy. He is a graduate of Donaldson High School, Emory University, and Northwestern Law School. So a little bit about our other speaker tonight, Hal Hardin. Beginning with his practice in the district attorney's office to his successful representation of diverse clients such as a governor, a national news organization, a lawyer charged with murdering her attorney husband, Mr. Hardin has earned his position as one of the top attorneys in the state. He told me earlier today that one of the most memorable moments of his life was when he met John Kennedy in one of the most impressionable times in his life. He had gone to DC to work as an FBI fingerprint technician, and I believe, and he may correct me this, he actually met him when he went to protest something. But immediately after that, of the impression, he joined the Peace Corps, and then later went back and went to college. So as you can see, both of these guys, I could go on and on about both of them. I will tell you, I did get, Hal, your assistant sent to me this fabulous article that I am going to include when we post this link, along with some articles that we have of Larry that you all will find fascinating about our speakers tonight. So going from here, I am going to, Larry, tell me about Walla Walla, because on every email chain that I've heard between the two of you all in the last 3 weeks, it took me forever to figure out what Walla Walla was.
Well, they weren't the best years of our life, but they were interesting. Walla Walla is home to the state prison in Washington, which is prescient in terms of what Hal and I have done all our lives. That's where we met 60 years ago, approximately. Hal, tell everybody how we met.
Well, I was actually across the river in Milton, Freewater, Oregon, and staying over there and working at a different pecannery. And I decided I would come over to, I believe you guys were in Libby's.
That's right.
And I went over to YMCA. I heard a bunch of you guys were staying over there. And I heard this accent. And I thought, that person has to be one of my tribe. And it was your brother. And he was a great card player.
Yes, he was.
And before the night was over, I asked him if I could borrow a few bucks from him because I wanted to play a couple more hands, and he did. He loaned me money. And about 10 years later, when he was president of the bank, I borrowed some money from him. And I said, you know, I first met you when borrowing money from you, and 10 years later, I'm still doing the same thing. And he was quite a fellow.
Yes, he was. No question. I learned at an early age, after some very impoverished poker games, not to play poker for money with my brother Frank. He was one of the best I'd ever seen at it. And that's what we did in Walla Walla. It was you, me, Frank, about a dozen other guys from Middle Tennessee, Nashville area, all trying to work our way through college. You know, minimum wage was $1.15 an hour. And Frank learned for some guys at Vanderbilt, his first year at Vanderbilt College, that the best paying summer jobs any of them had were out in Walla Walla. So Frank said to my mom, drive me down to the bus station in the school year. I'm going to take the bus to Walla Walla. I'm going to make enough money to pay tuition at Vanderbilt next year, et cetera. And of course, we let him out at the bus station. He promptly walked down to First Avenue, US 41, and stuck his thumb out. And the hitchhiking route, which he didn't bother to tell mom was what he was doing, was Nashville to Chicago, Chicago to Des Moines to Omaha to Little America, Wyoming to Boise to Walla Walla. And we were all out there to get jobs. Teams, did you have to join the Teamsters Union like I did? And
No, I didn't.
Oh, you missed out. We were making more money than you were then.
You were, but I had a little different. I had a little different MO. I would work here for a while, baling hay or whatever, and then I also misled my mother, God rest her, and I would get a bus maybe to Kansas, and on that year I met you guys, I got a bus ticket to Hays, Kansas. And Hays, Kansas is right up on the northern part of Kansas. And I thought it'd be a good place to hitchhike. But my MO, and I met up there, a guy picked me up in a 48 Pontiac, and we stayed together for the next 3 months, all the way through Montana and California and Walla Walla. But what we would do, the 3 years that I did it, is we would hitchhike, and then we would go first to the cannery and make seed money, and then we would go combine. We would go to Montana, usually up on the Milk River. We had a ranch up there. We knew the rancher, and we would combine there. And when we ran out of combine work and we're getting ready to go back home, we would go down to California and pick fruit. And it was really it was like a migrant worker, and we were, and but really it was such a pleasant experience, and it's one that I'll never forget. I always wanted to write a book about the stories that I heard out there, because everybody had a story, and it was just fascinating to be there, and it was a time of my life. I loved every day.
So quick question, what year was that?
Larry, what was it? It was
early 60s, 61, 62, 63.
Well,
I was born in 63.
I made my first journey. Actually, it was to Minnesota to work in '59. So I started a little earlier than you.
Frank was probably on the road then too. I couldn't disagree with you more though about the fruit picking. You know, Frank and I and a lot of other guys from around here would spend half the summer in Walla Walla canning green peas and cooking them. And when the green pea season crop ran out, we'd hitchhike up the Seattle area to Kent, Washington to do green beans until end of August. And when we got to Kent, Washington, you know, the jobs didn't start until the crop came in. So a couple of summers, we got up there 3, 4, 5 days early, had no money. We'd mailed all our Walla Walla money home to tell mom to hold on.
Always did that, yes.
And if we got to Kent early, we had no place to live, no income, and we'd go out with the migrant laborers and pick fruit. I can remember 2 summers picking strawberries,
right.
And that's where I disagree with you. It was the hardest work I ever did in my life. I was absolutely exhausted to the point of, you know, I'm ready to go home. I'm ready to go to the hospital. And I picked those strawberries on my knees out there at least 2 or 3 days at different times. It was brutal, brutal work. And I'm sure it isn't a bit different today.
Right.
I would have given anything not to have to have done that kind of work. Where were you living when you were out there in Walla Walla or Washington?
Okay, you're not going to believe this, but I'll tell you, Buck picked me up, his name was Buck, and in this old 48, 49 Pontiac. And so we went to Milton Freewater, and we decided that we would save some money by not going to the YMCA or something. And Buck said, why don't we stay in the city dump? I said, well, that's all right with me. So we would go over there at night. I mean, we worked like 12 hours a day, and we go over there and start a fire and cook. And I would sleep in the back seat, and he'd sleep in the front seat. And it was very enjoyable. Very enjoyable.
Yeah.
Of course, I found out that there are a lot of wild animals that hang around garbage dumps, including mountain lions.
Oh, good. Frank, so
we saved a lot of money there.
I'm not even going to ask where you bathed. That'll just be an irrelevant question.
There was a river right next to it, a river.
Frank and I were high class guys hitchhiking.
You were. You were high class, yes.
So let me ask y'all a quick question here. So tell me what some of your most impressionable memories were at Walla Walla, things that you were really excited about that was really fun, and anything that might have also been a little bit frightening.
Well, I've got a classic memory. It wasn't fun, but I guess a little bit. And it's certainly frightening to look back at. To get a job in the food cannery, you had to pass a test under the Federal Drug and Pure Food Act. And the test was a little 5-minute reel-to-reel video that we'd see about botulism. Undercooked food leads to botulism that kills people. I mean, this awful, gory videos of people suffering and dying. Now it's called Botox, and nobody worries about it. But the FDA regulations where you had to keep a chart on each retort huge cooker. We cooked 5,000 cans at a time for 37 minutes at a temperature of 350 degrees, and then took them out and put them in a stream passage to the warehouse. We had to turn in every night these charts that are automatically inked up on a graph paper of each cook of the 5,000 cans each 37 minutes, and turn those in at the end of the season of the FDA. So first season, I was the foreman of the cookroom out there. Sure enough, about the third night, the power failed in the factory. The cooks, instead of being 37 minutes, were like 16 minutes. Everything went down. I went and got my boss and said, Merle, you were out getting coffee or beer or whatever. The whole plant shut down. What are we going to do? He said, don't worry about it. I said, yeah, but what about all the graphs and the food? Are we going to throw them away? No, pull them out, send them to the warehouse. Merle, they only cooked 16 minutes. Don't worry about it. Come with me. He went and got a blank chart, ripped out the chart that showed the failed cook, put in the new blank chart, and took a red pen, it was a red inking chart, took a red pen and just drew a 37-minute chart on it. Said, we're fine. Send it to the warehouse, sell it. Tells you how effective FDA regulations.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's different these days.
Hal?
Well, I guess over in Milton Freewater, two experiences that I had were come to mind. First of all, at the end of when I quit working there, the factory caught on fire. That's the reason I quit. And you've never really lived until you've seen a pea cannery on fire where the peas are exploding because of the heat in the can, and it's raining peas. And so it was a very memorable event. But I guess the most memorable there was one night Buck and I were going back to the city dump, and in Buck's car, I forget if it didn't have a battery or an alternator, but I'd have to push it, and then it'd start, and then Buck would, and then I'd run up and jump in it. And so we're going out there, and it's dark, and the lights don't work, and so I have a flashlight, and I'm on the right fender, and up ahead of me, I see these eyes that do not look very good to me, and then the animal came out, and it was a huge mountain lion. Ooh. And the mountain lion looking at us, and I'm looking at him. Buck is just saying, keep the light on the road. and this animal crept back in the grass that was there on the side, and all I can do is just hold the light in this animal's eyes and just pray he doesn't hit me, attack me. And Buck is cussing, running off the road, and so forth. So that was one of the scariest times out there.
Yeah.
But another time that happened. This happened in Walla Walla, Washington. One year, I had driven a combine in Montana and other places, and all the combine men, they thought they were modern day, or at that time, cowboys, and they always said, you got to go to Walla Walla. and give the Skyrocket Hills a haircut. And the Skyrocket Hills are some of the steepest hills grain producing in the world, and the most productive. It has it's a product of all those volcanoes that have been out there. You can't walk up it; it's too slick. So the way you combine out there is you have a combine that the operator of the combine has to raise one wheel up on the high side of the hill and the other one down, so it will sort of level off. And then you have a bulldozer in front of you that keeps you on the side of the mountain or the hill. And when you get full of wheat, you tell the bulldozer operator, you give it a finger down, go down, we'll dump the wheat, and then we'll come back up. So this hopper fills up with wheat, and I tell the driver, and to tell you a little bit about the driver, he told me that he was the flyweight champion, boxing champion of Idaho. And I had a little boxing experience, and so I could see the signs of the boxer. I mean, he had the ears and the jumpiness and so forth. So anyway, I tell this guy, take it down. And I turned off the power because the wheat was just running out. It was just overflowing the hoppers and all that. So I don't have any power to adjust these wheels, but the guy's supposed to be taking me straight down. Well, he didn't. For some reason, I still to this day don't understand. We got halfway down the hill, and he decides to take a 90-degree turn. And when he did that, I mean, the combine just literally came over on top of me, and I broke the pedals and the blade there, and I was squunched in this little bitty compartment here, and underneath the combine. And I'd always heard the legend that death comes in threes on the Skyrocket. And I thought, well, this is me. This is my third. I'm going to be the third. And all of a sudden, it was very quiet after a giant crash, and this wheat is all on top of me. And I thought, it's not bad being dead. It's kind of peaceful. I mean, I'm not hurting. It dazed me a little bit. And all of a sudden, I smelled gasoline. And then I realized, I'm not dead. And so I crawled out from under that thing and ran as fast as I could away from it. So that was a scary time out there too.
Well, let me ask you this, Hal. Was it harder work in the canneries and the combines or working in the political campaigns back there in the 60s?
Well, the political campaigns were tough, but they were a lot of fun. And which brings me to the second time that I met your brother. I decided early on in life that I was going to follow, I think it was St. Augustine's philosophy of, to really live life, you got to taste a little bit of everything, not murder or these horrible things like that, but, boxing or learning the language or doing different experiences. And I had never been in a political campaign. And I decided I really want to be in a political campaign. So I went to John Hooker's campaign headquarters. And lo and behold, there's this accent there that I had heard in Walla Walla. And that was your brother. That's and right. So he got me in that campaign. And he asked me, he said, he always called me Big Hal. He said, now, Big Hal, can you drive a bus? And I said, well, sure, Frank, bring it on. He said, I'm going to fly you to Columbus, Ohio tomorrow. We're going to pick up a luxury bus and you drive it down here and you can be the bus driver. So I was a bus driver for 2 weeks. And I think I scared Hooker so bad that he said, why don't you just be my aide and travel with me personally? And I said, that's good for me too. So that's how I got involved in that campaign.
I think Frank wanted to get you involved with us in the 1964 Ross Bass for U.S. Senate campaign. And you really should have been there for that, because that's the only liberal candidate we won with for the next 15 years or 20 years.
And everybody said that a bunch of kids hollered him into office. I'm sorry I couldn't have made that. I was off in the jungle in South America by that time, in the Peace Corps.
There were two important things that came out of the two important memories that came out of the Ross Bass campaign, 64, where Frank and his wife, Jane Ann Woods, and 2 or 3 others of their age, right out of college, maybe first year law school, really ran and directed and strategized that campaign.
That's exactly
and
right.
Bass won primarily in a big upset against Frank Clement in the Democratic primary. He won because he promised from the outset, I am going to vote for the 1964 Civil Rights Bill, and got elected, and it already passed by the time he took office in November or January. But it was a real reorganization of the Democratic Party in Tennessee. The other family story out of the Ross Bass campaign was Bass coming back to the headquarters early in the campaign and saying to Frank and the staff, look, you got to write me a better speech to give at all these county courthouses. We're going to be in 95 of them. You're giving me a different speech every night. I can't remember these speeches. I'm not delivering a good job on. I want you to write one master speech that I can use in every county courthouse in Tennessee. Okay, Frank, I don't know if it's him or Jane Ann, Frank wrote that speech, and it was great, particular relevance today, I guess. Bass got out there the rest of the campaign every night, gave the same speech, did a great job, and the same speech boiled down to really one sentence. I am against disease.
and his Republicans
all across the state.
And his opponents called him Big Mouth Bass. Is that right?
Right, that's right.
But you're talking about that group of young people. I think one of the most memorable events in my life, and I think in Democratic politics, was there were a group of us, if you remember, it's a Tennessee committee, about I don't know how many, but close to 100 people, a lot of whom all you all would know. We decided that we were tired of the way the Democrats were running the state. And so we actually organized a coup.
It succeeded.
And succeeded. It would totally, we put our own guy in there, and nobody wanted the job. They offered it to Frank, they offered it to me, probably offered it to you, everybody else. Nobody wanted. And Charles Burson, who went on to become Attorney General here in the state, Charles had a friend named Rudy in Memphis.
Right.
And we decided that Rudy should lead the Democratic Party. And I remember the next day in the newspaper, who is Rudy? All of a sudden, this unknown has just come out of the blue, and he's now leading the Democratic Party.
Well, the Tennessee committee, I mean, you're right, this is a group of about 100 of us. I'll say all about our age, young, just a year or so out of school kind of thing. All of us politically interested, politically ambitious, and essentially we all just reached out to folks we knew and said, let's get together, let's take control of the Democratic Party, let's change what its goals are, let's make it more progressive and liberal, etc. And the problem is, you're right, we got our guy put in as chairman, or I guess executive director, we got the chief fundraiser put in, and it was like the dog catching the car. What are we going to
do now?
Sam, let me ask you a quick question. So, given where we are today, do you think you were successful? Did it make a difference putting your own folks in there and the things we do now? What would you say? How would you put it to today's times?
No.
I'll let you answer that one, Larry.
No, we didn't succeed. I mean, anybody interested in progressive, liberal ideas, like I'm certainly guilty of, looks back at our Democratic election and political campaign history over the last 40, 50 years. And yeah, a lot of good people have been elected to the state legislature, a lot of good people to the state Senate, a lot of good mayors. But in terms of governors, Ned McWhorter did a great workmanlike job of making the trains run and controlling the budget, etc. Phil Bredesen did the same thing, but at best, they're both moderates. So in terms of what I'd like to see in government helping people who are in need, no, talk to Gordon Bonneman, who negotiated up and down and fought with Phil Bredesen about health care for more people in this state. And Bredesen made the budget work on health care. He was great at that. But when it comes to civil rights and voter suppression and the death penalty especially, Henry Martin and Kelly in his office do a fabulous job on all the death penalty cases. They handle all of them basically in the state on appeal or habeas corpus. And they're having to do a great job because, Frank Clement, to his credit, used to pardon everybody on death row. He used to hire the first-degree murder convicts to come out and work at the governor's mansion as trustees out there. He understood more and better about criminal justice than most of his successors have, although that pendulum's swinging back now, I hope. Yeah, we've had some good governors, good, honorable people, but in terms of the goals of the Tennessee Committee, no, I think we failed ultimately. The young people today need to organize their own Tennessee Committee, and Harold Ford Jr. wanted and tried to do that and used that model very successfully in his race for the U.S. Senate, but came up 1.5%, 2% short on that. People like Margaret Bim, people like Betty Nixon, people like Carlene Waller, Martha Ragland in the past. These are all people who really epitomize what we wanted in the Tennessee Committee. But again, for all their successes, they've been limited. They've done better than I have. I'm not criticizing them, but they hadn't been able to achieve everything we need by any means.
No, and I think something, I look back at that era, that group of people, there was just something in the country, I think it came from John Kennedy, we believed that we could do anything, no matter what it was. I mean, well, okay, we can do that. There was never any doubt about that. And we were wrong about that, of course, but we were believers.
I disagree with you with that one.
We need to try every day, all of us, whatever our goals are. In the final analysis, it's not whether we win or lose, it's how hard we try and who we try to take care of while we're doing it. I'd like to win every time. I know you would, Hal. Everybody in this audience would. But, we had a great media, the Tennessean, to help us for many, many years. John Sigenthaler and Dwight Lewis and Jim Squires and a lot of other people that we can't really count on anymore. The Tennessean's really a non-factor in politics nowadays. Their endorsement, and for the other side of the ledger, the Banner's endorsement, used to really mean something in terms of votes and winning or losing. Now, there's no media that really has any impact on the political circumstances.
So true.
We're going to talk about Governor Blanton and Lamar Alexander's early swearing in. We've gotten into that.
Hey, I want to do one interruption here and tell folks, Larry,
person on it.
Larry, 2 seconds. For folks on here, first of all, I want to acknowledge again that Chancellor Perkins logged in and is watching, and I believe our Circuit Court Clerk Ricky Rooker is also on. But I want to also tell folks that please put questions in the chat bar because I'm trying to monitor it, and we will do Q&A here shortly after we get to talk, after they finish doing to a point. So go, Larry.
Hal, give us the 3-minute summary of you and Bill Leach and Ned McWhirter on the Lamar Alexander swearing in.
Well, that was the
part you can.
It was a sad event, and it was so sad, really. And I look back on it. I mean, none of those participants really talked about it for 30 years or so. Really, nobody really talked about it much until Keel Hunt wrote a book on it called The Coup. But I mean, the long and short of it was, I had received information, and it was an ongoing thing about what was going on in the governor's office and what was going on generally in Tennessee politics. I mean, just virtually everything was for sale. And kept getting all this information about, this is happening and this is happening, and all of these people are paying money to get out of jail or to get a license to sell real estate or anything else. I mean, there's a lot of corruption, unfortunately. And it just got to a point where on January 17th of 1979, I received some information and I had an FBI agent with me, and I said, you really believe this information is totally correct? And he said, oh yeah. this one it is. And we did a cumulative thing. And Blanton had just like 2 nights before at midnight had pardoned 50 people, some of whom were just terrible murderers, and some of whom we were investigating for bribery that we figured had paid their way out. But the long and short of it is, he asked me, so well, what the hell are you going to do about it? And I said, you don't want to know. And I figured the only thing I could do was to, without calling the Attorney General, without telling the FBI, without telling anybody, it just didn't work. I didn't want anybody else involved. And I don't want to get the Attorney General involved because he might want to slow me down a little bit. And so I called Lamar and I told him, I remember my words, I said, look, here's the situation. And I said, you've got to take office early and just stop him. And as you can imagine, I mean, here, this guy is shocked beyond words. And as he has said since then, I mean, Hardin really put me in a pickle. What am I going to do in this situation? But long and short, we talked for a long time, lots of phone calls. And he asked me to get in touch with the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor. And they asked me to get Bill Leach involved. And so we got a room. We hung out in a hotel room here under a fictitious name, and from there worked. How are we going to do this? How are we going to? I mean, it's a pretty difficult job when you think about it. I mean, it's no small job, you know, to put somebody into office and you know, where's the oath? Where's the oath of office? What's a highway patrol going to do? How are you going to secure the Capitol? All those things. But anyway, later on, after all of that, Lamar took office and that kept the pardons from being issued.
Well, now we'll just.
Some lawyers like, go ahead.
Yeah, I went through
So,
that.
Larry Woods, did you sue over it?
I sued Lamar Alexander over this. I was representing people on death row, not in Tennessee, but in Georgia at this point. Well, I did have one client on Tennessee death row at this point, but my other 2 clients on death row were in Georgia. At that point in our nation's criminal justice system, people on death row didn't have lawyers. You got a lawyer at trial, you got a lawyer on your Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals hearing, and that was it. So the National ACLU, which had offered me a job right out of law school, and that's why I was on their list to call every time they had a death penalty in the South that needed a lawyer. And since I was also licensed in Georgia, they signed me up for a couple of those. So I was paying attention every time Governor Blanton said to the media, sort of as a challenge and a fight, let me just tell you before I go out of office, I'm going to pardon everybody on Tennessee's death row. So I'm at my office, somebody yells at me down the hall, hey, Lamar Alexander just got sworn in as governor. And I said, no, that's 4 days from now, or 3 days, whatever the timing was. And it's no, turn on TV, you'll see it, it's live, watch it. So I did. And I sat there and I thought, okay, did Blanton sign any pardons, commutations for the people on death row before what I'm watching right now? So I started calling everybody I could think of to find out. And sure enough, word I was getting back was that he had signed some number of pardons or commutations that were sitting there on his desk, basically when he left the governor's office physically that day. Did they count? Were they worth anything? It was all very complicated legally, as the lawyers in the audience can imagine. And by the next morning, pretty much everybody was saying, well, if they didn't get delivered to the Secretary of State and other protocols, they don't count. So I gathered the lawyers in my office, small office, 5 of us at that point, together. And I said, look, we got to do something about this. I've got a client out there on death row. We've got 12, 15 others with the death penalty they're facing in Tennessee. This is critical for them. What are we going to do? I read the state constitution, and the way I read it, it seemed to me Blanton, regardless of when Lamar, his successor, was sworn in, Blanton had a certain number of days in his term as governor and still had 2 days to go. And in fact, later on, the Tennessee Attorney General's office is going to essentially issue opinion saying pretty much the same thing. So I turned around to one of the lawyers in my office and said, draw me up 15 pardons for the death penalty. Leave a blank for the name of the inmate. We'll get the list of who's facing the death penalty. We'll fill it in. I'm going to take it out to Blanton and get him to sign them. I'd represented Governor Blanton in a couple of lawsuits at that point. So I knew where he lived. He knew me pretty well for a lot of different reasons. And literally another lawyer and I and a minister drove out to Governor Blanton's house over on Robert E. Lee Drive off Granny White, middle of the afternoon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And when I got there, there were 20 cars there. And I thought, oh yeah, everybody's out here trying to get an interview with me. Sure enough, there were a couple of TV trucks there. I knocked on the front door, and Betty Blanton, his wife, came to the door and thankfully remembered me. I said, Miss Blanton, it's very critically important I talk to the governor. Well, he's not talking to anybody, I'm sorry. Over the course of 10 minutes, I talked my way in, and we sat down there in the living room with Governor Blanton, and I made my pitch to him. Governor, I think you're still, for legal purposes, you're still governor for another 2 days. You promised these people on death row you're going to give them a pardon. It's important for the future of what's going to happen in our criminal justice system. I've drawn up pardons. I want you to sign them, Governor. If necessary, I'll litigate the validity of them, and we'll go from there. Governor Blanton, it was so like Senator Gore in December 2000, when the Florida election was stolen from him. Governor Blanton said, look, it's done, it's over, it's too complicated, it'd be too chaotic for the government. If I showed up this afternoon saying, no, I'm still governor, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to sign. So we failed. Now, the interesting afternote to that story is 3 or 4 months later, I'm up in federal court trying some kind of case on a breakout in the hallway, and an FBI agent comes up to me and claps him on the back and says, Larry, you made a good argument to the governor out there at his house a couple of months ago, and sort of repeated to me word for word what I'd said to Blanton. I just looked at him with my mouth hanging open. He kind of laughed and walked off. I went chasing him down the hall and said, wait a minute, you talking about a wiretap and eavesdropping, but what are you talking about here? And Hal, I know you don't know anything about it, and I do know that.
Well,
never could get him to talk to me about it.
I can assure you that I did not authorize any wiretap.
Well, I know that. But now what I do want, Hal Hardin, is I told you in an email last week, talked about all this. I want you to put with your will a sealed envelope addressed to me. I want you to tell me the unknown details, because when I sued Lamar over all this and lost on qualified immunity grounds, I took Lamar's deposition all one day at the governor's mansion. So I know next to you and maybe Ed Yarborough, I probably know more about all this than anybody.
I'm sure you do. Probably more.
I need to print that deposition, put it up online.
Okay, hey Larry, I got a text asking a question for either of you. Are you familiar with the book or movie Just Mercy?
I'm not.
By the black lawyer in Alabama who's done such a great job on the Equal Justice Project.
So the question was, if you are familiar, does your experience with death row cases compare to the stories in the book?
I think now Henry Martin or Kelly or Mike Passano or one of the other people that have really carried on that battle for years now is probably better able to answer that. But I wound up getting appointed by Judge Nixon to represent everybody on death row on appeal. I handled a death row case in Georgia and a couple of other places. Knock on this wooden table. Everything worked out for all my cases with a lot of help from a lot of lawyers and very able judges. But in one sense, all death row cases are the same.
So I do want to say real quick to welcome Chancellor Ann Martin has logged in to listen, and so has Judge Phil Smith.
Two great ones.
So another question.
But Larry, you only told half of the story there. I think
you're a lawyer.
He's half.
I think I was also involved in that lawsuit. The judge called me, and I was taking depositions in Florida, and I was having a good time. It was the first time I'd had my family out in a long time. And he calls me up and he says, Hal, I need to appoint you to represent somebody on death row. I said, there's a couple of young lawyers here, very fine lawyers, but they're following the wishes of their client to be executed. And I think that, you need to be an independent guardian and represent him. And I said, well, if you ask me to, Judge, we don't ever turn down a judge's request. And I said, when's he going to be executed? I think this is like Friday afternoon. He said, well, I think it's going to be Monday. So I, of course, had to come back here and file a motion. And Judge Nixon stayed the execution. But all of that led, Larry had a representative fellow there named Grosclose. And there's a lot of opinions out there on the Grosclose case. And Harry's, my client, we all joined it. But I think one of the greatest things to come out of that was that we got death row, Unit 6 out of the state penitentiary, declared unconstitutional. And let me tell you, there was no question that we were going to win that lawsuit. I think it's one of the easiest lawsuits I ever tried in my life. And one of the ways we won it is we took the judge out there to see death row. And you can read about how horrible the conditions were. I mean, he went into great detail about it's 120 degrees in here and they're smoking and you can see the sweat rolling down the side of the wall. It's crammed, it's miserable. It was just a living hell. And truth matter is, truth be told, the attorney generals, and I think the governors, pretty sure of that, all wanted us to win.
I agree.
Nobody wanted actually bite the bullet, and it's because it's unpopular. But we were successful in getting Unit 6 torn down, and I think it was a great accomplishment of that case.
I agree. Now, how you got involved and how I got involved in that case is a good example of what life's like for a lawyer when a crisis hits. It was pretty much like the other case you're talking about. I was in my office 8 o'clock Friday morning, and one of my lawyers walked in and said, "Larry, who's your client on death row?" I said, "William Grosclose." He said, oh, okay. I just heard a radio announcement that a guy on death row named Harry's has given up his appeals and agreed to be executed. And like you, I said, when? And they said, Monday. And I said, you mean Monday night at midnight or Sunday night at 12:01? Sunday night at 12:01. And I then got a call from somebody who knew all about it that I won't name. He wanted confidentiality, who told me the same thing, that Harry's lawyers had agreed not to oppose his giving up his appeal. And I sat there and I thought this is going to be the first execution in Tennessee in 20 years, I guess, at that point in time. And if we start now, it's a downhill slide all the way. And I said, we got to do something about this. I went and saw my client Grosclose at Unit 6, and I said, Mr. Grosclose, you're not directly involved here, but it's going to affect your case. I want you to agree to be the plaintiff, file a lawsuit in federal court to stop this guy 3 cells down from you from being executed. And he said, great, you recommend it, I'll do it. We went back, we drew up, we worked all day Friday on about a 50-page federal court complaint. About 4 o'clock, I realized court clerk's office is going to close 4:30. I called the clerk and I said, are any of the judges still there Friday afternoon, 4 o'clock? And she said, sure, but they're all going to be gone at 4:30. And I said, look, no, you got to keep somebody there. I'm not going to be there before 4:30. I've got to have a judge. And the clerk, of course, said, well, you can go to one of their homes, Mr. Woods, you know that. I said, no, this is too complicated, too much paperwork. Promise me you'll find me a judge and keep them there. And she said, all right, I'll do that. I got there about 5:15. The judge he happened to pick was Judge John Nixon. And people now don't realize what Judge Nixon had to go through, I don't think. I mean, after he ruled an injunction against any death penalty executions in our lawsuit, after Hal and I both worked hard on it, and some others as well, including the original lawyers for Harry's, there were bills and resolutions being introduced in the state Senate every week to have Judge Nixon impeached, calling for his resignation. Somebody came by and shot out the front window of my law firm. It was a really grim public kind of case that really got the crazies agitated.
Yeah.
I think Hal's right. I think when you were representing Attorney General's office, he knew we were right on the law and the conditions. I mean, they fought us, but yeah, I think Hal's right that everybody understood what the end result of that case was ultimately going to be 10 years later.
Well, the state officials, if you recall, some of the best witnesses we had at trial were state officials.
Yes.
You know, like the Warden Dutton.
Yeah.
He just said everything that we wanted him to say.
Very
the
honest,
truth.
very forthright, very open and transparent about it. The
Very
Commissioner
honest.
The Commissioner of Mental Health, a fellow from Meharry Medical College, had been back, came and testified for our side. We also got people like the president of the American Psychiatric Association and Deborah Ottenow-Lewis, the chair of the psychiatric department at Yale, to come in and testify. I mean, we really, really had the facts and the witnesses and the testimony, as you were outlining earlier, that really produced awfully good results. I mean, you know, all my political candidates who are going to be liberal saviors for our community and the universe that I failed with, judges came through. I have to say, all judges, not just these federal court judges, but 90% of all the judges I ever tried cases in front of in this community, I had to say were honest, fair, hardworking, and did it right. Didn't always agree with them, but they did it right.
Okay, I've got a couple questions we're gonna ask because we have about 10 minutes left. We may have to do a follow-up series. This may be the new Netflix series online. So, question of how we'll start with you on answering. What's your most memorable case, and any pros or cons or trends you see nowadays in the courtroom that were not around when you started practicing law?
Well, the latter part of that, there's a lot of changes that have been there. I am glad that I practiced law when I did, because I still do, but it has changed dramatically from the time back in early 70s and so forth. But I mean, looking back, it's hard to say which trial you really thought was best. I mean, there were so many memorable cases. I mean, one case I had, I proved that the undercover agent committed a crime. That was the only Perry Mason case I ever had in my life. Another case was representing a doctor, and I'd been waiting 40 years to stand up and say, charge the jury and not argue it. That's what Jack Norman did in the Powell case, and it always left an impression on me. And we won that one. Somebody mentioned, or you did, Joyce, I guess, a murder trial.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you get her off?
Yes. Not only did we get her off, but we had the expungement order in our pocket when the jury said not guilty. The judge said, well, that's all. And I said, well, no, there's one other thing. We want the records expunged. But I'll tell you something else about that trial that was unique. It was on court TV worldwide, and I didn't like that. I'm never really fond of cameras in the courtroom, but after the first opening moments, I mean, nobody thought about that. But the great thing about that was that every night we would come over and we would watch it on TV, and we'd see emails or people calling in to the TV channel and saying, why are the lawyers doing this? Or what about this? Oh, I have a question about this. So really, it was like we had a jury out there that was saying, here's what we want to know next. And it really helped in trying the lawsuit to know what they were saying, what they were thinking. And we would, of course, the next day address what they were thinking. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Another great trial we had, there was a fraud case here, the service merchandise case, and I represent one of the vice presidents. And there were 5 charged with conspiracy, and 4 of them pled guilty. And my client had enough gumption to go to trial. And he was the only one acquitted.
I love it.
It's a lot of fun, but a lot of the cases, that's just not the big cases. I mean, it's so much fun in General Sessions Court, I mean, I can go on and on about General Sessions. I mean, so many funny things that happen there. It's just, it's enjoyable.
Yeah, I will tell you that Dwight Lewis is on with us tonight. So, real quick, Larry, do you have a quick answer?
Well, I represented the national chapter of the NAACP here in town for 30 years. And therefore, I defended the first African-American coach in the Montgomery County school system. I defended the first African-American school board member in a county over in East Tennessee. I defended the first African-American administrator in the Sumner County school system. And his case was State versus Walter Weich. Mr. Weich called me about 2 months ago, 30 years later, retiring, to thank me for my efforts, which I appreciated. Mr. Weich, I'll skip the factual details that came out in the trial. Mr. Weich was the vice principal of Gallatin High School. He was in charge of discipline. He disciplined a young 8th grade student who sent him home, and the young 8th grade student's white parent, a redneck by any definition, I welcome him to come complain to me about that description, came down to the school and threatened the assistant principal. I mean, he walked in the middle of the lunch hour with 100 people there and said, I'm going to kill your blank, 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 black, blank, blank, using the N-word a lot, etc., and literally threatened him in front of 100 people, all of whom ran for their lives, leaving him there to confront this guy by himself. Mr. Weich backs up toward his office. This African-American principal backs up toward his office. The white parent who's threatening comes to the door of his office, and Mr. Weich reached down in his desk, pulled out his .357 Magnum, and with this first shot, blew one of the guy's legs off, and he falls back. The injured, wounded parent kicks the door shut with his other leg, and my client shoots 4 more times at him through the door, causing more injury. So he's arrested for attempted murder. And we tried that till about 2 o'clock in the morning every night for about 2 weeks, a couple of months later in front of Judge Pellegrin in Gallatin. And the jury very correctly found that my client acted in self-defense, which I think every lawyer in the audience would agree on, the first shot at least. The rest of it, well, you know how juries can be. Thank goodness we have juries. So that was a very memorable case for me. I think the only other case that would rank with it in my dealing, I didn't even try. Jim Neal and Aubrey Harwell won the case at trial. A friend of mine named Bobby Wallace. He was in my brother's wedding. We'd known him that long, that well. He and another guy here in town who created the Nashville, one of the African-American national newspapers, worked for 3 years and opened up a bar with Sweat Labor, Sweat Equity over on Charlotte at about 11th Avenue. Their grand opening night went off great. When they closed the bar at 3 o'clock in the morning, a guy named George Gift was there. They didn't know him from Adam. He said, can you call me a cab? I need to get to the airport. I got a flight to Florida. Well, sure. Well, if Bobby, my friend, says, you don't need to do that. Let me finish this and this. I'll give you a lift out to the airport. I live out that way. Well, long story short, Mr. Gift pulls a gun at the airport, puts 4 people on the plane, including Bobby Wallace with him, points the gun at the pilot and says, we're going to Havana right now, nowhere else. And plane eventually lands in Jacksonville to refuel. At least that's the excuse, you know, to get down on the ground. FBI shoots up the plane when it lands, kills everybody on board except Bobby Wallace. He walks off the plane and they arrest him for, you know, aircraft piracy. I wrote the brief on the motion to dismiss. I didn't do a good enough job. They denied it. It should have been granted. Jim Neal and Aubrey Harwell wound up trying it at trial and winning it with the jury in Florida. Jim always said it was his best case ever. And I agree with him. He did a super job. Just like he did.
Okay. I told him that too. It was his best case ever. That's an incredible case.
It was. Really
okay,
was.
So we've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, and I've got a couple more questions here. And this is, again, why we've got to have a follow-up of one of these. So I'm going to kind of combine a question here, and then I'm going to do one last answer. I'm going to do one last thing. So I'm going to combine a question with, if you needed a criminal defense attorney right now, who would you hire? That was a question. You can say I plead the fifth. And who do you admire as which local state politician do you most admire and why? I don't want to get into who you don't admire, but who you do admire. Okay? Larry, go first, but keep it short.
All right. What lawyer do I reckon? I get a lot of questions like that from students in my constitutional law class. I got a friend needs a lawyer. Who should they call? And typically who I name these days is Hal Hardin, and have for years. I used to tell him you need Jim Neal, but you can't afford him. I knew what Jim charged. I couldn't afford Jim. Hal Hardin. The other lawyer I recommend these days, the lawyer down in Murfreesboro that tries a lot of cases here in federal court. Jiminy, now I can't call his name. Henry Martin, what's the guy's name, wins all the trials on your federal criminal justice panel? Email me if you need to know the name of anybody, and I'll give you his contact information. He's great. There are a lot of good lawyers. What politician do I admire? Jason Powell. He's a state legislator from down the Nolensville Road area here in Davidson County. First got elected about 3-4 terms ago. He tries hard on the important issues. As a Democrat, of course, he's going to get outvoted on everything he brings up in the state legislature, but he's honest, smart, got the heart in the right place. Yeah, Brenda Wynn would be my other choice. Brenda Wynn's our countywide official here, county court clerk. Is that her title? No, that's Mr. Rooker, who I also admire. Brenda does a great job. Really.
Okay, okay, Larry, that was two.
Brenda Gilmore, State Senator Brenda Gilmore.
Okay, Larry, we're cutting you off. Larry, we're cutting you off. We're cutting you off.
Joyce, I want to thank you for putting this program together.
Okay, we're cutting you off. Okay, Hal?
Well, I want to thank you too, Joyce, and the PC. I'm a little embarrassed that I have a beard now. I've been quarantined here in this office for like 2 months, and I have not cut my hair and I haven't shaved. But I don't.
Hey, Larry volunteered to come do it.
I mean, yeah. I think Sarah Lee's been working on him. But,
right.
No, there's so many that I admire. I mean, and they constantly do things that I think are really spectacular. I mean, look at what Ann Martin did, for example. This last week on vouchers. I thought, it's a brilliant decision. And Brenda Wynn, I mean, she's one of the most wonderful persons around. I mean, we've got we're blessed with some very good judges and clerks, and I don't even know where to start on trying to answer that. Now, I've got another kind of list, too, that I could get into.
I know. Well, let's get, okay, so our final question, and I will have to tell you, because everybody in the city has my cell phone number, so I'm getting all kinds of texts going, please have a follow-up, let's do this again. But I'm going to give you the final question, and then let me say something, and then for everybody that's on here, I do hope, pay attention to what the Women's Political Collaborative does. We're having some great programs. We have a program next week that will talk about domestic violence and what's happened through the tornadoes and COVID-19. We're going to have Judge Sheila Calloway on in a couple weeks. We've got some really good programs, so just follow us on it. But this comes from I'm going to just read her question from our dear friend Margaret Bim. You guys are amazing. I love you both. What do you see for our political landscape in 2020? What do you advise young people? How so are younger voters affected on our political landscape? Don't get too partisan on this, but be nice. Be nice, okay?
I'm disqualified then, but the answer is...
Larry, I'm just asking you to be nice, okay?
No 4-letter words. I'll save those for after I go off the air. The answer is young people have to vote. If you're a young person who wants to see the world made better and the bad guys punished like they need to be, then you need to turn around to every young person you know and say, did you vote in the last election? If you didn't, why not? And by golly, I'll give you a free beer, or I'll give you a free ice cream cone. I want you to vote for the next election. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. I mean, all these polls are so disproportionate and wrong and inaccurate because they count, oh yeah, if young people were voting, here's who would win. They're not going to vote. They traditionally don't. We've got to figure out a way to get young people to
Right,
vote.
and I think that is, no matter what political party you are, and we know where all three of us are, but I think, and that could be a whole nother program, is you can talk about it all day, but if you don't vote, either way, you really don't have a leg to stand on. Hal, what is your remarks?
I agree with all that, but you know, you've got to never stop believing. You've got to believe, and if you believe, so you shall be. In my opinion, you've got to have something that's driving you on, that you believe in, and that you're willing to stand up for. And so to me, young folks I see, I worry that they're not believing. They're going through this terrible time, and they see it as pretty dark clouds. But they are going to be the leaders tomorrow, and I think they're going to be a great generation when they come out of this, because they have things in their hearts too that they believe in, although they're kind of depressed right now, most of them that I've seen.
But again, it goes back to voting.
What they need to do is to ask Margaret Bim and Harlan Dodson to run their campaign with your
That's right.
people win campaigns.
So on behalf of the Women's Political Collaborative, I want to say thank you. I hope you would come back. I would love to, because I think what's fascinating is the fact that you all met each other because you picked peas in Walla Walla, Washington. I mean, and how you became great friends. And it goes back to what Hal just said. It's being, you know, you're committed to something. You committed to something as young folks, and you stick to it, and you get out there and work hard. So I hope you all will commit to doing another program for us in the next month or so, and talking about campaigns.
Yes,
okay?
he will.
Okay. Again, thank you both. Any last comments before we tell everybody good night?
Well, if there's another time, I hope I'll be shaved.
Hal, stay as you are.
Next time I'll tell the hang in there big Hal story.
That's a good
I
one.
love it. So everybody on tonight, thank you so much. If you want to listen to this again, give us a couple of days. It'll be up on our Facebook page and our website. And again, guys, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.